Charlie, does this thing work? Just the other one. While that's coming up, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We just want to tell you that we've had a wonderful few days in your country, in your beautiful country. We haven't been very far. We've been through Pennsylvania and New York State. We've been thoroughly impressed and enjoyed it tremendously. And the hospitality we've received has been quite overwhelming, for which we thank you. We want to thank you for your openness, your friendliness, and your willingness to share with us your experiences. All right, we seem to be on track. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview. We're going to just have a look at the map of our country, our portion of the country, on a bit of background about the Karoo, where we actually farm, and what we farm with, and what our concerns are. Jalen gave you a very comprehensive overview of the situation in the country. And it's a good thing she's with us, because she keeps our minds balanced, I must say. If you look at this map, close map of South Africa, you'll see that colouring in yellow, that's where Lukie and I farm. It's more or less in the centre of the country, and we're right in the middle of the Karoo, the area that's going to be fracked up properly. If you see on the left, you'll see a big logo on the top left, BKB. That is the cooperative movement through which we do all our business, that have very generously sponsored our trip here. And the reason for that is because when we started learning about all the issues relating to hydraulic fracturing, we started becoming very suspicious, because the oil and gas companies were not, in our opinion, revealing the truth. This company had the foresight to send us over on a fact-finding mission to see for ourselves and to share with our fellow man in South Africa exactly what was going on. And this is the reason for us being here. We are eternally grateful to them for having had that foresight. Now let's talk a little bit about the Karoo. It is approximately 103,000 square miles in extent. And as you will see, they're proposing to frack up about 60% of our country. It has a population of approximately 3 million. Now, we would like to think that it is the heartland of the livestock industry in South Africa. We have approximately 30% of the numbers, of the total stock numbers in South Africa are to be found in the Karoo, which comprises about 12 million animals in total, comprising sheep, cattle, goats, ostriches and the like. That's only domestic stock. We haven't even spoken about the wildlife, which is numerous in numbers. So as a consequence, you can see that it is going to have a devastating impact on the farming activities. To talk a little bit about the topography, the rainfall and the climate, the altitude ranges from roughly 600 feet to around about 8,400 feet. Fairly large range in altitude. With that comes an associated range in temperatures. We go from minus 12 degrees in the winters to up to 45 degrees in the summers. The associated rainfall also varies vastly, from around about 8 inches up to about 30 inches up in the higher mountain lying areas. So we could truly be deemed as a semi-arid part of the world. Now, just to talk to you a little bit about my own business, what we do and what we keep ourselves busy with. We farm with just a little bit about my family. I am basically the 4th generation to be farming on this specific piece of land. My wife Liz forms a very integral part of my business. I think she keeps me in check and out of trouble, and she plays a very important role in the total management of the farm. And I think she always tells me, when I go away, the farm runs more profitably. So I think I will stay away a little longer. Then I have a son who is now moved into the business with me in a partnership style. He's age 32, and I have 2 daughters who are in business. and doing very well for themselves. Our farming operation comprises roughly, the size of the property is roughly 16,000 acres, which by Texas standards is not very big. In our part of the world, it is a very average sized property. And on the property, we run approximately 3,000 sheep. They're wool sheep. We share them annually. And we market our wool through the co-op that I spoke of. And we farm with about 600 head cattle. But interestingly enough, if you just quickly look at that dog below there, which forms a very important part of our business. That dog protects our animals, our sheep in particular, from predators, being black-backed jackal and lynx, the caracal. We have, since we've been employing these dogs, we've pushed up our lambing percentages from something like 45-50% up to 95% with the aid of these dogs. They form a very important part in our business. And then we also, because we're very fortunate to have permanent waters in the form of springs and fountains. And these fountains supply water for us to be able to run about 160 acres under irrigation. We plant alfalfa for hay in the winter months and grass clover pastures on which we use to finish off our livestock. Alright, let's get down to the nuts and the bolts of this whole thing. Our concerns are for this whole industry is quite severe and serious. If we look at the food security, South Africa currently is self-sufficient in terms of food production. And if you think about what the oil companies are wanting to do, they've been allocated approximately 40% of our entire country has been earmarked to be fracked. And we are told by the gas companies that will supply us with enough gas for our needs for the next 100 years. Well, I find it hard to believe them at the best of times. You can understand what that's going to do and how that's going to impact on the food production chain throughout the country. If you look at water contamination, we are very, very concerned about water because it is a scarce commodity, and particularly where we farm. If you have a dry spell, we have major problems. And the other major concern that we have is the level of our aquifers. They vary from between 40 foot and about 300 foot below the surface of the soil. As a consequence thereof, we've been warned by your specialists in this part of the world that we can expect severe contamination with our wells, our aquifers at that depth. And this is apparently what New York State is also faced with. Their aquifers are roughly on the same sort of levels. Now, in addition to the concerns we have, you can understand what it's going to do to our rural communities and our livestock, which are solely dependent on these aquifers. Our farming properties in the Karoo don't have many wells, but the wells that they have are very sparse and fairly spaced between each other. So they form an integral part of our business. Then, if we look at air pollution, apart from all the other toxic materials and fumes that get blown into the air, which we are all aware of, the one aspect that concerns us greatly is that of dust pollution. We do not have our roads being tacked or tarred. I don't know what the terminology is, but the fact is it's hard surface that's dust proof. We have, most of our roads in the interior are dirt tracks. Now, you've just got to close your eyes and imagine 1,100 of these trucks traveling on our dirt roads. What impact that's going to have, A, on the roads, and B, what it's going to do to the vegetation that our animals are supposed to live from. I don't believe that any animal is going to be in any form of production because they won't want to eat all that polluted vegetation of ours. The sustainability of our farms will certainly be affected, and also we can understand that our industries, our woolen industry, mohair industry, which is the largest in the world, will certainly be affected because they earn us quite a bit of foreign exchange. Now, you can understand too that this is going to place a tremendous amount of pressure on our commercial farming enterprises, because all that's going to happen ultimately, it's going to dissolve the Karoo into an industrial wasteland effectively. The government at the moment, they've placed a moratorium, and I think it's been very brave of them. How long they're going to keep it in place, it remains to be seen, because there are a lot of issues that concern us. But I think the oil companies will keep throwing money at them until eventually some pockets open, and then the problems will really start. The laws and regulations, there are none at the moment, and once again I think the oil companies like to make use of this because we haven't had this. It's a totally new concept. As a consequence thereof, there are no laws to govern the whole fracking operation, which is a great concern to us. If we look at property values, what's been of tremendous concern to us when we learned for the first time about this whole fracking operation, all land there didn't seem to be any more transactions of land taking place. And this was strange, because on investigating this, we found that nobody wanted to buy land in areas that were going to be drilled, because people got, access to internet, limited amount of information, and then they didn't want to. No land changed hands, and I think as a consequence of all that, you can understand it put downward pressure on the price of land. And I think that this is probably what's going to be happening, and it has already happened in your part of the world, so we've been led to believe. But I do think we have one advantage. Jolyn alluded to the fact that the state owns all the mineral rights. Now, while that might seem to some as being a major problem, I believe we can turn that into a positive. And I say that because it will give us the opportunity to talk to people who are on the same footing. The rules will be exactly the same. The money will be made by the government, so it will be a matter between the oil companies and the government. And that will enable us to at least lobby people who are on an even plane. So we won't have the problems that you people will have with some who have lease rights and some sold and some want to and some don't want to. The oil companies make use of these opportunities. It's a case of divide and conquer, and I think we can probably use that to our advantage, I believe. Right, some effects on the model, fibre and costs. The employment promises. Now we've just come through like everybody else in the world, through a fairly deep recession. And as a consequence of that, the unemployment levels have raised dramatically in our country. So guess what? The oil companies have latched onto that. They've gone to governmental officials, both local and national, and they've said, we will help you solve this problem. We will create jobs. They don't bother to tell them, who's going to be doing these jobs. But this is the sort of thing that we have to be putting up with. At the end of the day, it is a problem that we are faced with. The industrialization of our rural and farming communities is of concern to us, because it's just going to absolutely destroy our livelihoods. Business is being conducted, production is being done in this part of the world for the past 200 years on a very sustainable way, and this is a quick fix that these chaps are going to come in with, and there's absolutely no ways they're going to be able to sustain it. And I think if we can convince them, and Lukie will be talking about this, if we can convince them just to spend all this or some of this energy on renewable energies, then I think we'll be a better off, and our country will be a better place to live in as well. Similarly with our farming fraternity and our farming employees, they have a sense of belonging. This whole thing is part of it. They've lived there for all their lives, and their forefathers have as well. I say I'm the fourth generation. A lot of these people are exactly the same. They know nothing else. Their lives and their will be in jeopardy as well. So we face major problems as far as that's concerned. And also then the medical implications. We've heard, as far as we've gone, about the issues that have been related to medical expenses and costs and this sort of thing. And we need to inform our government of all these ills and so forth. So we have a major problem on our hands. The long-term impact, as far as I'm concerned, on this entire thing is that, we've got to maintain the long-term security of our land. Because I believe that mankind can live without gas, but you cannot live without food and water. And with that, I'd like to thank you.
So when fracking is going to come into our small towns, the communities are going to be affected. Chaps like this, that's been working on farms for years and generations, they're going to see there's an opportunity out there. There's going to be a feeling that they can do better. Whether that's going to be lasting, we don't know. That's why we're here. But the fact is, everybody in the Karoo, everybody in the affected areas are going to be, to some extent, affected. We, like Dougie and them, I just farm with different sheep. We farm with sheep, goats, cattle, and Sue and I rear some ostriches from time to time as well. You might ask, now, why don't you just farm with cattle? Why don't you just farm with sheep? Or just with goats? But the vegetation of the Karoo is so sparse and it's such a brittle environment that the sheep eats certain portions of the grazing, the goats browse a little bit more, the sheep concentrate more on the Karoo bushes, and the cattle eat the grass. So the whole balancing of the production system is of such so that we can utilize the grazing that's available. The wildlife, you know, when the oil and gas companies come to talk to us, to consult with us, they said that we're a very low risk area because we're so sparsely populated. But as Dougie has indicated to you, domesticated animals are in the region of 12 million. We don't even know how much wildlife are there in these areas. And it is also, as you can see at the bottom, a reasonably good and big industry. There's quite a few Americans coming to our part of the world on an annual basis. And there is a wildlife industry. And we manage this as well as we manage our domesticated stock. It's not a free-for-all. Now, in terms of the area where we are, we have our dry spells. We're very dependent on rivers, as you can see on the left bottom there. And these rivers we use to, in good times, produce lucerne, hay, oats, corn, anything that we know we're going to need in the dry periods to sustain the health of our nutritional needs of our animals. And you can think for yourself, the stream on the left, if that gets contaminated, what the effect's going to be. I think I've brought a few photos because just to show you sort of the vegetation, the brittleness thereof. This is a typical winter landscape on the farm, and we will have in an area like this on say a 7,000 acre farm, you could have 5 water points. Can you imagine if we must lose one of them? The brittleness of the vegetation. Already we have to be very careful in how we move our stock around in order for the vegetation to maintain the production of the farm. We also have the seasonal rivers that flow through our farms that we utilize for our crops and lands. Then the groundwater. This is the farm that we farm. It's a 4,000 acre place in the mountain. This is your typical setup that you will get, that we have to consider when we think about fracking. On this specific farm, which I said is 4,000 acres, there are only 3 water points. Of this one is one. You've got the windmill, the reservoir, and then the animals that drinks out of the trough. So if any one of these 3 points are contaminated, we can forget about farming there. It will be the end of farming on this specific farm. So it's not like we've got a vast number of watering holes and points that we can utilize. And that's why the water contamination, not even the requirement of water, is so important in our farming setup. We normally take the rivers into dams that we store our water for the dry periods, that we water our lands to make fodder. Right. Why are we in the US? We are really trying to find answers as far as gas is concerned. Why do we need to explore for gas? So, and we're learning from you. I don't think that anybody in South Africa can make a decision regarding whether we should fracture or not unless they've been to America, unless they've been to talk to the people that have directly been affected. So we're seeking to get the answers on the whole hydraulic fracturing process, the before, the during and the after. And we've been honoured to speak to fantastic people who has not only given us their life stories. I don't think that if you want to make a decision about hydraulic fracturing, you must have been to Carter Road. You must be able to have stood next to Ron and Jean's place and smelled that water well of theirs and listened to it. If you haven't done that, you can't make that decision. So we are here to get all the scientific help from the engineers, the science people, the doctors, and we're going to go back with it so that we can advise the people that's going to make our decision as to whether we can frack or not a better one. Like I said, we want to know from you guys as far as the people, animals and environment is concerned, and we're learning those lessons and we've been exposed to the best. I think it's so fantastic that you in a country where you've got so much expertise as far as hydraulic fracturing is concerned. I think if I can take you a little back to Jonan's trailer, fantastic trailer. But if you look at the professional and expert people that spoke on that trailer, they just saw the gas. None of you have noticed. Not one of them spoke about the risk. The risk wasn't the issue, and this is what we want to take back. There is huge amount of gas available, but if we can't explore it safely, should we? So the lessons in America is going to be of gold when we go back. And as Dougie has said, the impact on employment, because this is a very important thing. I went to see the local mayor in Craddock and Graafrenet because this is a community thing. And they said to me, the people come to them and say, we've got an unemployment of 30%, we want jobs, so we want gas. And it's our duty to go back and to put the whole job issue into context. So as we stand here and as we learn from you guys, for which we are very grateful, between Jolan, myself and Dougie, we have to come up with a strategy. I don't know what it's going to be, but we have to come up with a strategy that we can affect the decision making as far as business, NGOs, farmers, rural communities. We have to have an impact on all these bodies in South Africa. I don't have the answers yet. All I know is I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. This fracking thing is in my mind. I don't know how I'm going to get it out. I can't go to sleep without thinking about the implications of it. So I think if we try our best and we speak to the right people and we take what you've taught us and we use and we take your assistance that's been offered to advise the people that needs to make the decision, maybe we can flip the elephant and get it right. Thank you.